This is going to be a very different video from the ones that I usually make, and a video with a message that I think a lot of people out there need to hear. Today I'm going to tell you the story of how I got into the tarantula hobby, why I decided to quit the tarantula hobby after only 2 years due to one crucial mistake, and the reason I decided to return. I will also compare my time in the tarantula hobby versus my time in the dart frog hobby and discuss why my experience has been so different. Not only because of the difference between the two hobbies, but also because of very different approaches by me. I think this video is going to be relevant and relatable to keepers of any exotic pets, regardless if that is dart frogs, tarantulas, snakes or fish. And I especially want to reach you if you are new to the hobby to hopefully inspire you to have a healthy mindset. I will of course mention some scientific names of tarantulas and some personal anecdotes throughout the video, so tarantula keepers will probably find this video even more enjoyable, but I will make it possible to follow along regardless. And before we get into it, I just want to say a quick disclaimer that future content on this channel will still be mostly focused on dart frogs. I'm not going to turn it into a tarantula channel again, so if you're just here for the frogs, then you don't have to unsubscribe to the channel. Anyways, before I can tell you why I decided to quit the tarantula hobby, we of course have to go all the way back to the very beginning, so you can see how it started and developed up to that point. Let me take you back to June 11th, 2017. Up until this point, I had kept some other exotic pets, including the crested gecko right behind me and mostly some praying mantids and various roaches. But now I was finally allowed to get some tarantulas and it was time to get my first two. It was a warm summer's day and I went to a pet store which had just returned from a big reptile expo in the German city of Hamm, a very famous expo for those of you who are in Europe. And they had brought some tarantulas with them. The tarantulas I ended up getting that day was a semi-adult Pterinochilus albophilosus, though this was back in the day when it was called Brachypelma albopilosum, so that was a while ago, which eventually turned out to be a male, but at this point it was a large juvenile. And a second spider as well that was a tiny Acanthoscurria geniculata spiderling. At this point I was only 10 years old, but I had spent countless hours every single day reading up on tarantulas on different forums and especially watching the YouTube channel The Dark Den, which was a huge inspiration for me. During the next few months I ended up buying a few more tarantulas. Some notable ones included a Chromatopelma cyanopubescens, Brachypelma albiceps, Brachypelma hamori, and a few larger Acanthoscurria geniculata specimens. This was just a world of opportunities, a brand new hobby, and I was just looking forward to experiencing all it had to offer. And the green bottle blue and the Brachypelma albiceps had especially been very high on my wish list for a long time at this point. At the end of 2017, I had acquired 10 tarantulas. I think many tarantula keepers can relate to this fast growth in the beginning of the hobby, since it's a lot more fun to keep a small collection of tarantulas than to keep just a single one. Each tarantula needs very little maintenance and they can also have periods of hiding for a long time or refusing to eat any food. However, the next year, which was 2018, would really become the year of expansion for me. It started very early with an order of 7 tarantulas in early January, and only 2 months later I got 9 more at a reptile expo. I should also mention that these larger orders were mostly tiny spiderlings, but still, do you see where this is going? These large orders, along with individual purchases here and there, made the total number of new tarantulas this year very high. The largest order was 14 tarantulas all at once, though all but 3 of those were tiny spiderlings and the other 3 were juveniles. But at the end of the year, I had bought a total of 46 new tarantulas. Now, I've just been saying a bunch of numbers, but to be honest, that's what the tarantula hobby was turning into for me at this point. Now, to be fair, I had also sold a few tarantulas during this same time frame, either to get some money to afford to buy other tarantulas, or in some cases to free up a bit of space. But the total number of tarantulas in my collection was still very high. Funnily enough, this was also the year that this YouTube channel was started. It was initially called Tarantula Nest and was completely faceless and voiceless and just consisted of a bunch of feeding compilations and a few rehouse videos. Most of the background footage in this video is from those days, so I have to apologize for the camera quality being quite bad, as it was all filmed by a very shaky 12-year-old. However, this is about the time when something would happen. Buying a new tarantula from my wishlist just started feeling more like, oh, kinda cool I guess, business as usual, rather than something amazing. And it was more like, I should have that spider, let's get that spider, rather than wow, I would love to have that spider. And eventually I just stopped being excited when it was time to feed my tarantulas or when I saw a tarantula molting or something like that. It was just not the same magic as it was before, when it was constantly happening all the time. Have you ever read a book that was really good and all you wish is that you could read it again without knowing what's going to happen? It felt almost like that, with the exception that I had not even read the book properly at all. I had just skipped past all the way to the final few pages and spoiled everything, missing out on all the natural build-up towards that point. Which brings us into 2019, which was the year when I lost my enthusiasm completely. This year I bought a whopping 1 new tarantula, and also a few scorpions. However, as the year went on, I just started selling off more and more of my collection. And in May, I put up an ad for the majority of the tarantulas that I owned at that point. I had mentally compiled a list of about a dozen tarantulas that I still wanted to have in my collection and just sold all of the rest. One guy actually came and bought almost my entire collection in one go, and I wanted to pick a guess on whether or not that guy is still in the hobby to this day. If you said no, then you would be correct. Later that same year, I downsized even more and lowered the number to only 3 tarantulas. And 2 of those were mature males, so they didn't live for very long at that point, and soon afterwards I was down to only 1 tarantula. My Acanthoscurria geniculata female that I had raised all the way since she was a tiny spiderling back in June of 2017. I didn't have the heart to sell her after all those years, but all things considered, I had essentially quit tarantula keeping. I had completely fallen out of love with keeping tarantulas. However, that sparks the question, why did I quit tarantula keeping? Why did I get so bored of it? At the time, I wholeheartedly believed that the answer was that tarantulas were just not the right pets for me. That same year, I started up my first dart frog enclosure, and that was rewarding in a very different way for me. I don't think it's a coincidence that this happened at the same time. When you build a beautiful slice of rainforest, it naturally falls out of fashion to keep tarantulas in essentially dirt jars. However, in retrospect, I think the reason I quit so abruptly was a very different one. My collection was simply growing at a pace that would be impossible to maintain in the long run. This means that whenever you inevitably have to slow down, it gets less exciting. I love getting new animals, and my pet wish list is never going to be empty. But honestly, it's actually ridiculous when you reflect on our childish urges to get more animals from an outside perspective. It's natural for us that are into the hobby to want more, but seriously, just impulse buying animals, getting every single animal that you want right away. Whatever hobby it is that you're into, you will quickly realize that there are no ugly dart frogs, there are no ugly tarantulas, there are no ugly snakes and no ugly fish. And this is a problem. Your collection will simply never be complete. I know many tarantula keepers have a much bigger collection than I used to have and are really happy with it. I don't think the problem for me was keeping 50 tarantulas. It was how quickly I had acquired those 50 and how many I had sold in that same time. Another thing I want to mention is the effect of selling as many animals as I did and keeping each animal for a shorter period of time. I absolutely don't think that selling animals frequently is a good mindset to have for most casual collectors if you want to have fun in the hobby in the long run. Of course, it's fine to at some point realize that a certain pet species just isn't for you. But I was purposefully raising these spiderlings to sell once they got bigger. And I also bought many tarantulas that were eventually rehomed and replaced. Rarely bought by me with the serious intention of being kept for their entire lifespan, which for females can be as much as 10 to 30 years. To me, I think they all just started to mean a bit less when I had that mentality, and each spider didn't really get a chance to grow on me over time in the same way. Anyways, it's time to get back to the story. I was now down to 1 tarantula, and I had completely fallen out of love with the way I kept tarantulas or the idea of keeping tarantulas. But they never stopped being completely freaking amazing animals. So from time to time I would check in on some of my favorite species on social media. I was liking the idea of starting a little collection again on a smaller scale and in some nicer enclosures. Eventually, I built 3 display tanks from my own design in 2022, and this was actually the first time I had assembled actual glass enclosures myself. These were filled with 1 species that was completely new to me and 2 of my old all-time favorites. A group of Monocentropus balfouri, a Psalmopoeus irminia, and a Chromatopelma cyaneopubescens. The cyaneopubescens was actually my old female, which I repurchased when the guy I initially sold her to had to get rid of his animals for personal reasons and asked if I wanted to have her back. It feels good to have her back, and I'm planning to let her stay here for the rest of her lifespan, even though she's already old and past her prime. I recently also got a Theraphosa sturmi spiderling again, which I had been looking forward to for years, as this has been my favorite genus for a long time. I actually didn't even sell my previous Theraphosas, they were just males that died of old age. Now that I'm no longer underage, old world species are on the table for the first time. If you don't know, tarantulas from North and South America have a less potent venom and are considered much more beginner friendly than old world tarantulas from mainly Africa and Asia. Old worlds are not fun to be bitten by, but their venom is still not lethal, and if you're experienced, calm and responsible, the risk for a bite is very low. Anyways, I get so excited seeing my Theraphosa sturmi digging up substrate against the front glass and burying her water dish every single day, my Acanthus chorea geniculata's wonderful happy dances whenever she's been fed, the sight of my balfouris occasionally being visible, the nightly strolls of my Psalmopoeus irminia, and my Chromatopelma cyaneopubescens just being the sweetest little big spider ever. I really do feel like I have found that spark of excitement once again that I had when I got into tarantulas in 2017, and this time I don't think I will ruin it anytime soon. Some of you may be wondering why my time in the dart frog hobby has looked very different. I would say that the main thing holding back my collection growth is the fact that dart frogs require nicer and bigger tanks. Almost all tarantulas can be kept in super simple plastic tubs with just a bit of substrate and a hide. But dart frogs require a well-planted bioactive rainforest enclosure, which naturally slows you down. However, if I had a bit more time, money, space and resources when I got into the dart frog hobby a few years ago, I could totally see myself going down the same path as I did with the tarantulas, and I'm very happy that I didn't. There have certainly also been many cases in the dart frog community as well, where someone gets a massive collection within a few years, gets burned out and sells off everything. I have acquired only 9 dart frog species in my 6 years in the hobby, getting the first 4 within about a year and a half, and then getting only 1 new species per year. I would say that this has been a good pace for me, and right now I'm much more excited about upgrading the frogs that I do have into larger enclosures, such as the one that I have right outside the camera here, rather than buying new species. I have also never sold any of my dart frog species. Of course, I have sold plenty of froglets, but I have never sold my breeding group of a species just because I got bored of them after 6 months and wanted to replace them with something new. I'm very stubborn and committed to breeding every single dart frog species that I have, instead of just selling them after a few months when I get bored to replace them with a cooler looking one. Keeping a single species well until you really succeed with it is so much more rewarding than just keeping a bunch of new ones in small enclosures and replacing them after 6 months. Some of you may be wondering, where do I go from here? And how am I going to avoid my tarantula interest turning out in the same way as it did last time? I currently have 2 main species that are seriously on my wish list: Poecilotheria metallica and Pterinochilus murinus. 2 very unique old world species that I haven't had a chance to keep before, but have dreamt about since I was 10. I'm also planning on increasing the numbers of Monocentropus balfouri, as I find this species particularly interesting with their communal dynamic, and I would like to maybe get an egg sac one day. I know that I could order all of these tarantulas from some Polish website and have them shipped here to me within a week. Nothing is stopping me besides the current winter weather here in Sweden, and I know I could afford it, and placing an order would only take 20 minutes. But I'm not going to do that, as I think that would just take the fun out of it. I have decided that I will only buy these new tarantula species as tiny spiderlings, so I can watch them grow for their entire life. Of course, I'm also going to put them in some nice enclosures and not just throw them in some plastic tub with a bunch of dirt in it. I was also considering waiting until I can find ones that were bred here in Sweden, just as a fun thing for some extra challenge, but I don't know if I'll stay true to that. One day I will find the right spiders. It might take me 6 months or several years, but when I do, I know that we have a long and exciting journey together and I can't wait. Or I can wait. And until then, I'm going to enjoy the tarantulas that I have. In conclusion, I'm not trying to force or convince you to buy animals at a certain pace. That's entirely up to you, and I don't think this is the secret answer to everything for everybody. I know many people with much larger collections than the tarantula collection I had who don't see it as a problem at all, and as long as you keep your pets happy and healthy and they make you happy, then that's good. But while I may not be old, I have been in the exotic pet hobby for 11 years at this point, and I have seen countless people get into the hobby, acquire a vast number of animals, and then sell off everything within only a year or two. Some of you might want to say that I was just an inexperienced kid when I started keeping tarantulas, and that the reason it went as it did was my age. And sure, I think my age and some immaturity and impatience definitely had something to do with it in my case. But I have seen the same thing happen to so many, I guess, grown-ups too. For me personally, I think this slow and patient approach is very important in order for the hobby to stay meaningful to me over an extended time, which it now has for 11 years. I think you need to expand slowly and grow with your animals and with your hobby in order for it to be sustainable in the long run. It's not just about buying and owning all of those hairy spiders or pretty dart frogs. It's about the enclosures, the journey, and the friends you made along the way. And with all of that said, I think it's about time to end this video. Do you agree with what I said, or do you think I was just being overly sentimental? How quickly has your collection grown over the years, and what makes you so captivated by our wonderful animals? And have you ever been close to quitting at some point? On this channel, I normally make in-depth tutorials on how to set up rainforest vivariums and how to care for poison dart frogs. So if you think you'd be into that, then please consider subscribing to the channel and pressing the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. There's also a new hype button on the YouTube mobile app, which you can press if you want to help this video get promoted more. If you want to see more of my animal room, check out my Instagram page at gecko_geek06. I also have a Discord server which you can join through the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.